What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Lumix Live. It's been a couple of weeks because I completely forgot that last week I was going to be away on vacation, so I didn't record a stream for that one, so I apologize. But yeah, we're back. We're going to be basically just kind of having a hangout this week. I've got my S1 Mark II hooked up here because I do want to show you all a couple of things that I've seen some questions and like how to do certain things, like the file transfer that we can do between SSDs and internal media or onboard media. So I want to walk through that just so we have a record of that, and you can see how to do this kind of stuff. But if you have questions during the stream, as you can see a couple people have been doing, tag me in them. Tag Lumix USA throughout this probably about an hour and a half, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. But outside of that, we're also just going to be kind of just having a general just chat and conversation. With the rise of anamorphic lenses for much more affordable prices, I also want to talk about how I use them in photography, at least as of today. Since in the photography side, there's not really any easy, direct way to, kind of easily work with anamorphic lenses from a photographic perspective. So I want to talk about how I work with those. Back a couple of weeks, at this point it's over a month ago, when I was up in New York for Build, I went around and was shooting with the 40mm f1.8 Surrey autofocus anamorphic and was using it just as a photography lens. So I want to show you, how I got those reconverted into a de-stretched image, because I think it's fun. It's fun to use some of these different lenses in ways that maybe they're not initially designed for, but yeah, kind of just go over all that stuff and just kind of have a nice fun chat. So yeah, as I said, if you have questions, a topic you want to chat about, tag at Lumix USA, and I'll be able to see it, and we'll be able to just kind of have that conversation and go through it, at least as much as I can and as many of them as I can get to. Before we dive into that, Lumix Pro Services. In the United States, we have the red and the platinum tier. The red tier is free, so if you've purchased a new camera, you just got that brand new S1 Mark II or 2E or S1R or whatever new camera you've got, be sure to follow the QR code down below if you're in the US. You can get yourself registered, get that 3-year manufacturer extended warranty on there. But if you're someone who likes, kind of more in-depth service and support as a kind of safety net in case something goes wrong, you can always upgrade into the Platinum tier. That's a paid level service. That tier will get you the 3-year warranty, but it also gets you 2-day repairs with next-day shipping both ways, 20% off out of warranty repairs, that kind of stuff you drop or break or damage something that way. You also get access to the membership hotline, so if you prefer to speak to somebody on the phone, you have access to that. And you get all your annual sensor cleaning, lens calibration, firmware updates, all that's the kind of maintenance stuff if you don't like to do that kind of stuff on your own. So if you're in the US, I encourage you to check the QR code below or the link down in the description. I do also have the link down there as well for the global portal, so you can see if it's available in your region as well. Otherwise, you go through the normal Panasonic service and support program. Other thing I want to remind everybody about, I want to do this at the beginning of the stream because most of the time I forget at the end, is to also mention the Discord. We have an incredibly active and vibrant Discord community. It is discord.gg/LumixUSA. Link is down in the description. Join us over there. You can always continue these conversations over text instead of through the video platform like this. So if something comes up in your mind and you're like, I really want to find a place where I can ask that and, kind of remember it, Discord is a great place for that. We also run contests over there. We have all kinds of stuff highlighting various different creators' works. So if you've got, work that you're really proud of and you want to show the community, feel free to jump in there. We have a couple different platforms for that. There's Content of the Week. We just did a micro film sprint. And just lots of cool stuff happening over there, alongside of all the technical conversations too, if you've got those kinds of things, as well as a suggestion channel. So if you've got suggestions for things that you want to see in the future, you've got another platform there that you can be able to, drop it in and get that over to our team as well. Yeah, so let's kind of jump into this. One of the first questions that came up here was from Solarion33, I think I'm pronouncing it right. It says, I would like some clarification regarding S52X versus S12E, specifically for long-form video recording. The S12E has better features, but for heavy video loads, which is preferable? And Bob's comment back on that was that the S52X is a stable and reliable platform for demanding video sessions. And, there's definitely a lot of truth to that. With how many different cameras come out and the different options that are all made available, a lot of times it's going to come down more to what you need as a videographer, as a photographer, as a general creator, whatever you want to call yourself, right? So, the S52 series has the benefit of, a little over 2 years of history in the market. So you have a lot of, kind of existing users' ability to provide their firsthand experience. You have a lot of creators out there, the review community, the creator community, all of this stuff across the board. You have a lot of people that have had a lot of experience with those cameras. So, if you're looking for what is the long-term experiences with it, yeah, you're going to find it. And the S52X, I think, and the S52 for that matter, have proven themselves to be incredibly reliable, long-standing tools. However, something that, you want to keep in mind is that, there are the things that everyone has been asking us to do in as many cameras as possible. And that's stuff like make sure that you can do 4K 60 without cropping the sensor, or being able to shoot at higher, quality settings, or being able to have a bunch of extra features. So things like Bluetooth timecode, if that's something that works for your workflow, or the better viewfinder, or the different types of media, like all of those little things kind of come into play as well. So when you start looking at, what your needs are as a content generator, photography, videography, or general content creation, it really kind of comes down to what you desire out of a product, or finding someone who's doing similar things to you to form an opinion. From my experience, for what it's worth, since we're here, I've been doing since probably about a month and a half before the launch of the S1II, I have been using it as my live streaming camera. That's the one that we're looking at right now. And this isn't, I'm not doing this over HDMI. This is USB-C out to my computer, running the webcam, the UVC functionality, and I'm powering this through a dummy battery. And my office right now is, temperature-wise, my office right at this moment, is what it's been for most of the day, is about 72, 73 degrees right now. At the hottest, it gets about 78 in here. And the camera just runs. I pretty much, from like 6 a.m. in the morning when I get up, and I come into my office to start my day, I turn the camera on, I plug it, the UVC system is running into the computer, and I have the thing powered over the dummy battery, and it doesn't turn off. Most days it doesn't turn off until about like 6 or 7 at night. Sometimes it doesn't get turned off at all because I just space and I forget to turn it off, and it just runs, and I've never seen a heat warning on this camera at all. Now, for context, that is outputting a 1080p 30 frames per second signal to the computer. So the camera's in 4K, but then when you plug the USB-C in, it runs it at 1080 30. So if that's something that you need, or an indication relative to what you need for long-term recording, that's something to keep in mind. I've never had the problem of this camera overheating or even giving me the thermal warning. Now, all of my cameras I do set to the high thermal management setting, because, for one, I'm not hand-holding this camera, so leaving it up on the mount I have on my wall means, I'm not adding any extra heat by holding it with my hands. I'm not worried about, letting the camera run physically hotter to the touch, so that's fine. And yeah, it just runs. So And this is actually, I mean, it's also anamorphic. Not that really makes a big difference in the camera. So yeah, take that as you will. I would say, go look at people like Vu and, some other creators out there that are using the new system for various different types of capture. Look at, if you're in weddings, look at people that are leaning in towards the wedding type of content creation or videography, photography, that kind of thing. See what their experiences are, because something that I believe wholeheartedly these days is that there isn't a one size fits all product. There almost never has been. You have this idea of hybrid cameras in the sense that I can take them and I can do both kinds of work within the bounds of what is reasonable for this kind of platform, without having to go to an ultra high end cinema camera or box type cameras, that kind of thing, for ultra long recording times. So yeah, just take a lot of that into your consideration. If resolution and frame rates are your priority, the S1II does have the leg up over the S52X, or the S52 as well, because it has the 60 frames per second and the 2:4:1 ratio, so that's going to be the more CinemaScope ratio. So if you're someone who crops your content into that anyway, kind of normally for delivery, then that could be a big benefit for you. If you don't care about any of that stuff, if you're not shooting in 60 frames per second or higher frame rate kind of capture, and you're doing things like 24 frame or 30 frame, or you're doing open gate capture, an S52X might be perfectly fine for you. I don't think there's anything wrong or negative about going with a quote unquote last generation product if it does what you need it to do. So yeah, that's my kind of 2 cents on that one for you. Obviously, I'd love it if everyone buys the new cameras, because that's awesome. But that's also why we keep all the other cameras around. Not everyone's going to want the newest camera. It doesn't always fit what people want. Some people don't care about the newer stuff. You just want a very specific product, and as long as it does your work and does the job, and you're getting paid for it, then cool. Doesn't matter what it is, as long as the end result is what you need it to be. So see, I am not going to try to pronounce your name, because I do not read, I believe that's Cyrillic, I think. I don't know, I could be completely wrong. But yeah, I don't know how to read your name. So first one's, will S52X get timecode via Bluetooth like the S1II and S1R2? I want to use my 2 S52X cameras together with the S1II and the Zoom H6E for shooting interviews. I don't believe so. I'm not 100% sure, but I believe, because the Bluetooth modules are very different between the two cameras, I think that might preclude it from being able to get Bluetooth timecode. But honestly, I'm not 100% sure. But I am leaning much closer towards it. It's probably not going to come to those cameras. I do know that there were certain things in the newer cameras that were only possible because of the hardware changes that we've made between various different components that were used internally. Sometimes, like I said, it can come down to something as simple as it's a different Bluetooth module and the older one didn't support it, or didn't interface with the processor the same way, or the processor is slightly different, different revisions, different coding, that kind of thing. But yeah, so I don't think that's going to come to the S52 series cameras, but obviously time would tell, and our engineers are always good at trying to do everything we can to keep existing cameras updated. But at the same time, the S52X, like I said, is a little over 2 years old. So I don't know if between hardware and just timing, if that's something that would come back to a previous gen camera. Next one was Lumix Flow. Will Lumix Flow get multicam support like Sony's monitoring control app or Canon's multi-camera control? We've asked the engineering team about this. Truthfully, at this point, I don't know. It's not something that we've had the opportunity to kind of really be able to follow up heavily with. So at this point, no clue. Next one, last one, rumors, which we don't comment on. I don't rumors are pointless, because no one outside of the people that work in a company know anything about what's going on. So there's that. You say the F4 is great, but it's a bit dark and lacks stabilization. So the reason why I do want to comment, at least on the second half of your question/comment, is about stabilization. We've talked about this before. Our in-body stabilization is strong enough that you don't need lens stabilization. There actually is zero benefit to in-lens stabilization when you're under something around, I think on the newest cameras, we can comfortably say that out to about 100 millimeter field of view. Traditionally, it was closer to about 50 mil field of view is about where the cutoff was, kind of. Or lenses that cover past that, kind of transition point. The reason for that is that the in-body stabilization, because of the field of view, your in-body stabilization can move enough to compensate for the range that would be needed for the, between 5.5 and 8 effective stops that SEPA rates for. And there's actually no benefit to having an in-lens stabilization. In fact, there are actually caveats to doing it. Couple of those caveats are maybe a little more size, weight, and cost reasoning. So when you have to put a stabilization unit in a lens, if you want it to be the proper matched, to what we can do with our stabilization, since we're hands down the best stabilization in the market, those units have to be big. They have to have enough room to move the element to maintain the stabilization range, which is the purpose of a dual IS system. And when you start going into the area where the body can control and give you all of the ratings that are needed, and now with things like cropless image stabilization, there is literally no reason to do it. So lenses like 16 to 35 range, the 24 to 70, the 24 to 60, stuff like that, we're not doing in-lens stabilization because it's pointless added cost, it's pointless added weight, and it's pointless added size to the lenses. Yeah, that's kind of it. So, let's see here. Do S52 Series cameras have an internal battery for the clock? If so, if depleted, can it be user replaced? I can't remember if it's a battery or a capacitor, but if the internal power source that maintains things like your clock and your settings and stuff like that ever does die, you would need to send that in for service. It's not a user replaceable piece without having to actually disassemble your whole camera, which opens up a whole realm of you don't have the tools to align the sensor back if you have to go that deep for it. If you break something, it's going to have to go into service anyway. If you don't have any experience working on electronics, you'd have to send it in for service anyway. And at that point, once you go in there and start changing things, the service and support team don't know what you did, so usually your costs end up going up higher than if you just send it in to begin with. So yeah, I can't recommend going in and trying to replace or find if it's a capacitor or a battery, depending on what kind of camera it is. And that's true for any camera. More because if you don't have the experience, almost always it ends up being more expensive, because more things need to be replaced in order to maintain the quality of the repair or the service that's done by the manufacturer. It doesn't mean that you don't have the ability to go in and do it yourself, and if you want to take the risk, that's fine. But just know that at that point your service and support could be more expensive if something doesn't work out right. But yeah, if you ever run into those kind of problems of, the camera's not holding time anymore or something like that, which a 2-year-old camera shouldn't have that problem unless you put a battery in it once, let it sit on a shelf for 2 years straight with never being touched. You can run into some problems with that because batteries and capacitors can go bad. Pro tip, don't store lithium-ion batteries empty. That's a really bad idea. But yeah, if you ever run into those kinds of things, just get the camera submitted for service. And yeah, it's just better to do it that way. The new Lumix Flow app is great, but you can but you can only start and stop video recording while using the smartphone as a monitor. Will there be an update to allow photos to be taken with the Lumix Flow app? No. Lumix Flow is not designed for photography, nor will it be designed for photography. If you need to be able to capture stills with the camera and you want to do it remotely with a monitoring tool, that's where you're going to use Lumix Lab. Lumix Lab has a remote camera control function. It's actually more suited for video use. You have a little more control over it with quick menu and things like that. You can also control video through Lumix Lab. The big deal with Lumix Flow is that you're also getting support for things like metadata tagging for a good clip, a bad clip, a not good clip, or a kind of need to review it later. You get the ability to kick out the XML file when you're linked into it. So if you're working in your NLE of choice, you're able to just drag the whole project, all the files over, and just load the XML, and all your files are clipped and ready to go. That's where that app's benefit is. So yeah, it's not designed as a photography support app, and it's not going to be. So if you need photography stuff with it, that's where you're going to use Lumix Lab. Both of them, same connection method. Now with the updates to Lumix Flow, where you can do things like wireless and all that kind of stuff. So Bluetooth connect first, then it'll trigger and say like, hey, here's your wireless connection. We got to connect to it, and then you should be good to go. On that note, I do want to mention something that I did see in the comments in a couple different videos and some over on Reddit and on the Discord. People asking about different OS versions. So I'm running Android 16 on this phone, and Flow and Lab work perfectly fine. I have zero issues with connecting, staying connected, being able to do everything wirelessly control the camera, transfer images, all that stuff. And then I am running the iOS, was it 26 preview, the dev preview, the newest one, on this 15 Pro Max, and same thing. All the apps work perfectly fine. Everything stays fine in, kind of background use. So, yeah, it's up to date with the latest. It seems to work fine with all the latest versions of the OSs that are out there. Obviously, as time goes on, you'll probably see formal updates, and app updates are usually going to come around when we bring maybe support for like the S52 series, which is the next question that's asked. That's usually when you'll see like also like the versioning stuff come up. It's there's always so much work being done on these apps that a lot of times it doesn't make sense to just do a standalone update for just bringing in the new OS. Usually there's also not really that big of a need for it. But if you ever do run into a problem with any app, this is our app, any other camera app, anything like that, where, you update your phone's OS or your tablet's OS and all of a sudden the app's not working, try uninstalling and reinstalling it. I know it sounds ultra basic and, kind of, like way too simple of a thing to suggest, but I have found a lot of times if you do that, and I've had to do that with things like Instagram and, various other apps that I use. I've had to do that with Lightroom as well. A lot of times that can just fix everything as well, especially when you make major OS update changes. So, and then transitioning right into that was any info on when Lumix Flow app will be supporting S52 series. So we don't have any updates yet. The team is working on bringing the update to the S52, S52X, and the GH7. Like we always say, as soon as it is ready for public use. Obviously, you guys will know. We'll talk about it here. I'll set everything up to demo it and show you everything that it can do when paired with the S52 series or a GH7. But until then, yeah, nothing new to share yet. Let's see here. Another question, if I may. Being able to set shutter behavior at power on. Set shutter behavior at power on S1R2 is great. However, you cannot set this up as a shortcut on a function button. Any reason why? I think it's Steph. If you could clarify what you mean shutter behavior, because there isn't anything like at power on. Or do you mean the shutter closing mechanism? Do you mean the shutter closing mechanism, or do you mean like literally like I want to be an auto shutter, mechanical, electronic first curtain, that kind of thing? If you can clarify that, I can dig back into that question. And obviously, we're going to be a little behind because I don't do these in low latency mode for chat. Is it possible to add a way to take pictures of ourselves with the timer mode? When I use the timer, the camera focuses instantly instead of waiting the end of the timer. I come unfocused. Test. Yeah, so I was actually talking to someone else about this the other day. Our timer mode, for better or worse, it's designed as either, at least from inception, designed for either the logic of, like, I'm doing a long exposure and I don't want to touch the camera. Cool. Use a timer mode for that. It's kind of a more old school way of using them. Or I'm taking a group shot and I got to be in the picture too, so I'm going to half press the shutter. It's going to focus on the group, hit the shutter button, I can run into frame, and then I'm good to go. I know what you're describing doesn't help for that, kind of use case because of the way it focuses first. That's where just use your phone. Link it up with Bluetooth. You don't even have to do the Wi-Fi connection with it. You just connect the Bluetooth, and then now you've got a remote shutter here. So you can get into frame, get everything set up with the timer on there. So you still leave the camera in timer, but you can do it to like a 3-second timer. Get into frame, just tap the shutter button on the phone, and then you're good to go. That's what I would recommend for it. I don't think our timer is going to change anytime soon. But that's how I do it. It's how I did it over Thanksgiving with like family group shots and all that kind of stuff. Yeah. So, let's see here. Kofi, that beard. Yeah, it's coming in pretty thick. My grays are starting to come out in the chin. So, I like it. I don't know how long I'm going to keep it because it's getting like stupid hot. It's 98 degrees Fahrenheit. Right now it was 103. So what is that, like 40, close to like 40 C or something like that? I don't know. I'm terrible at the conversions. So, do you have more details about what was changed with the update for the G9 Mark II, the GH7, and the GH5 Mark II? No, I don't have any of those details. I know, so like there's the security stuff that gets updated. A lot of times with little updates like that, where there's not really much information to talk about, it's usually a compliance thing. Could be things like radio frequency stuff. It could be Wi-Fi certification, things like that, especially on like the newer cameras that have things like Frame IO compatibility, where you have to have a root certificate also deployed on the camera. So yeah, like little updates like that, or stability improvements. We found tiny little bugs that were maybe so ultra random that they're not even worth mentioning, because it was like one person happened to find it and it was an easy fix. So the team's just like, yeah, we'll just throw it in. And we had to do the security updates for the cameras, so cool, we did it. Think of security updates similar to things like what happened on our phones, where, you may get like a monthly security update on your phone, and, it's never anything that's really worth like listing out, because 90% of people wouldn't even know what the heck any of it means. But it's usually like, definition updates, things like that, or compliance, like I said, so... Rhett, what's your favorite color for the S9, US or Japanese exclusive or whatever? Also, what color do you think is the best seller? Also, please tell Japan to send some titanium gold to the US. Tragic we can't have nice things. I would say, aside from like black, obviously like black cameras across the board almost always are the best selling products, period. That's just how at least in the US, that's just at least how the US market works. I think green is probably the next best selling of the colors. I know we still have issues keeping that one in stock, because randomly it'll just be like we need a ton of them. And we make sure we have a lot of these cameras in stock. the thing's been one of the best-selling cameras that we've come out with, especially because it speaks to a lot of people that aren't necessarily in this community, that aren't day-to-day, die-hard photography videographers. It's a very approachable camera for a lot of people, and offers a lot of flexibility for them. So, hand in hand, we see a ton of uptick with Lumix Lab downloads across the board for iOS and Android users. Tons of first-time users are getting into the system, getting into cameras in general through the S9 platform, which is great for all of us. The more people that get into this world, the better. Whether personally you like the product or not you, Rhett, but in general. Whether someone likes the product or not themselves doesn't mean that there isn't a whole bunch of other people that absolutely love the products. I think that's true for everything in this industry, but color-wise, black is probably the number one seller, or is the number one selling. That's always the number one selling. I think green is number 2 in the US. My favorite color is the titanium gold one, the one that is exclusive in some of the Asian regions. I would love to see that come into the US. I have no idea if it's going to. Sometimes, like I was saying, because of the way color cameras sell, the different variants of them, it makes it a little more difficult to kind of figure out, how many of these would we bring in? Is there even enough people that would be, warrant going through the process of bringing it in, getting all the dealers set up, getting the product shipped to the US through all of the import craziness that exists, and then out to sale? Is it even going to be price effective, to sell that way? But yes, that titanium gold is possibly one of my favorite colors I think we've ever made. That and the dark green are my favorite 2 colors. There was a recent update with the S52X. What are some of the things that came with it? It's just minor little updates on the S52X in that last one, so nothing really to write home about. Hey, Kofi, how are you? And yes, we did talk about my beard. What's your favorite squeeze factor for Anamorphic? Have you got a chance to play with the Mantis lenses yet? I have not had a chance to play with the Mantis lenses yet. I have been using the Suray 40mm, which is the one that we've been streaming on for a little while now. I do like this lens for this purpose, because it's pretty simple. It's not an overly dramatic squeeze. You still get, I can do flares, all that kind of fun stuff. Though I don't really use it for the flare idea. I just like having the aspect ratio, being able to have a 40mm on here, but have the wider and taller, or the different, separation between depth of field and compression that you get when you use a lens like this. So outside of that, I have really liked using these guys, the Suray Saturns. These are the 1/6 D-squeeze anamorphics, or 1/6 squeeze ratio. And that's primarily just because they're small, they're full frame, and they match nicely to either my S1II Series cameras, my S5 Series cameras. They match up really nice on the S9 as well. So for me, I really like them for that use. And I'm primarily using them in a photographic sense anyway. So things like squeeze ratio, not a big deal. I do like being able to de-squeeze the 1/6 ratio, because if I remember right, that brings me out to I think that brings me out to a 2-to-1. Yeah, that brings me to a 2-to-1 ratio, I believe. Or no, is that the 1/3? See, I'm terrible at the de-squeeze ratios. I just know that it gives me a de-squeezed image. So yeah, those are probably my favorite ones as of now. I would like to play around with one of those, was it the Beetle lenses? If it comes out for L mount, that would be pretty cool too, because I like the idea of doing the vertical, like vertiscope kind of thing. because I've been doing that for a while with the Saturns. Just take the screws out and rotate them out 90 degrees, and it's been kind of fun to play with. So, let's see, we answered that one. Great to see you back using Lumix Lab App on an iPad Mini. I noticed the image quality is not the same as built-in Photos app. The iPad default app is very clear, while the app seems downsampled, making it appear blurrier than they really are. Any tips? So the app, if I remember, I forget what it is, but the app does have a lower resolution preview because it's designed more for color, not necessarily like, you know, checking image sharpness or things like that, at least at this point. So using it for, you know, checking focus and stuff like that is, I mean, you can, because honestly, you only ever need about a 50% zoom in to determine if you've got focus or not. Anything past that, your viewer's never going to really be able to tell, unless it's a drastic difference there. But yeah, honestly, it's just how the app's set up. Apps like this that are designed to, you know, work with much higher resolution or much more detailed files than your mobile devices typically are having to deal with, typically have to find a balance between, you know, highest resolution, highest quality preview versus what is the, you know, kind of, I don't want to say acceptable, but what's the mid-ground that works well on the newest phones, but also works well on the older phones, in how you pick its compatibility. It's kind of the same thing with like MOV versus MP4 on mobile devices. Mobile devices from us, it's MP4 video could be transferred, or MP4 Lite. MOV video files can't be transferred over Wi-Fi, one, because of resolution and size, or primarily size. The other is also compatibility. A lot of older devices that are still in circulation now in large numbers don't play well with, you know, high bitrate MOV files, so it's just not a good user experience to provide that. So it doesn't get added. Kind of the same thing here. So, yeah. Let's see here, Bob. Topic on dual capture. Will there be an update to the S1R2 to record 4K video and take 44 megapixel photos simultaneously when pressing the shutter button? Use case example, plane spotting. Probably not. I don't think so. Mainly because it's the same thing. I get the purpose of it, but it's primarily because the quality of video and the bitrate that we record is typically so much higher than what most other camera companies out there are doing. So you run into either image processing pipeline challenges because you're trying to run a much higher end video stream to record and encode and then save, so it doesn't really leave much room for the still side. Two, we used to do it and no one used it, so, you know, at some point you start to, you know, determine like, hey, no one's using this feature, so why do we keep supporting it? It just doesn't make sense. We could use that, you know, resource allocation for something better. And three, when you do playback of the video files, you can save the images out as well, so, you know, that kind of thing. At that point, you'd have to be shooting an open gate to do that, obviously, but yeah, that's just kind of where it is as of now. I don't think that's something that's ever going to come back into the cameras. But yeah. Always let us know, though, stuff like that, because when you leave that in the chat or you leave that in the comment section after the video is posted, or you head over to the Discord and you leave that in the suggested channel, those are the kinds of things that, you know, the more our engineers and our product planning teams see stuff like that and are exposed to the various different ways that all of you use the cameras, the more informed they are, which means the better product can be developed, which means if all of a sudden there's a ton of people clamoring for one very specific thing and it's something that we can do, you know, there's a higher chance that something like that could happen and be, you know, added or updated to the stuff. Yeah. Is there a chance that we get the option to change autofocus subject during a recording like Sony does on their touchscreen? Autofocus subject during recording. Well, let me double check something here. Where is my... That's my 16... Ah, here it is. Give me 1 second. Let me check something. So, what I'm going to check, and I'll link over to the other camera in a second. The new 24-60 has a lens function button, and one of the things you can assign to it is your subject detection options. But I've never tested it while recording video. So let me check and see on that one. While I'm getting this thing set up, let's see if there's any other questions before we go into that. EH, how's it going, man? Are there any recording limitations with resolution or frame rate with dummy battery adapters? Looking for a wall AC solution that will handle 5.7K RAW for sit-down interviews. No. What I do recommend, though, is the DCC18 EH. That's our first-party dummy battery. It's a USB-C pigtailed end, so you can plug it into anything that's 9-volt 3-amp, like wall voltage. I plug it into this like Anchor power, kind of desktop thing that I have. So one, that it has the protections built in, so overcurrent and all that kind of crap. But also it's I think it's like 30 or 40 bucks. So it's more expensive than I think some of the third-party ones are, but I have seen horror stories and horror situations of third-party solutions that seriously screw up cameras. So I don't recommend using third-party dummy battery solutions, honestly, ever. It's just not worth the headache. But yeah, so I would recommend using ours. It's the DCC18 that I'd recommend. Can we get the in-camera photo rating capability extended to where pressing the button on a photo cycles from 0 to 5 stars instead of just marking 3 stars? We can ask. I don't think that would ever come to the camera because it's kind of an overcomplicated solution for a single button action, because you'd always have to remember how many times do I press it, and if I wanted to have this one rated as a 3-star, but I clicked it to 4. Now I got to click how many extra button clicks to get it back to 3. Versus just in the playback mode where you're not really using many of the buttons on the camera, just programming in the ones that you want to use and just remembering which button to press. So I don't think it'll be a toggle like that to cycle through them. But you can change what the rating is, and you can assign more than one button to do it. So, yeah, sorry. Let's see here. We see new wireless mic systems like the Hollyland system as an example is full chain 32-bit to the hot shoe. Would you be able to open protocol to third party to make compatible adapters? Doesn't necessarily... I saw this commented on another video and in a conversation that I was with, and I think there's a lot of oversimplification being done or assumptions being made about how easy stuff like that is to do. Because there is one manufacturer that has this, kind of multi-input, shoe. And, excuse me. So, yeah, I don't think it's as easy as people think it is. So, to start with, I'm not someone who I would qualify as educated enough to say, yeah, sure, that's something that could probably get done. I'm going to lean much more on the side of, yeah, that probably can't be done. because for one, the way our system works, it's through the pin connector, the typical hot shoe pin connector, which is a photo designed, pin communication that we have found a way to utilize and make work, and do what we need it to do. You also run into, some of those other companies. Why should they? If their goal is to do everything internally, and at that point it's just a single, box piece that sits on there and communicates, like, that's cool. But you, the users, would need to, kind of push the other manufacturers to be like, hey, this is something that we want to see. I think before it would be something that would just, be easily looked at to, quote unquote, easily looked at to be done. Doesn't mean that, like, it's not something that, we haven't looked into before. Ways to do other, inputs through our hot shoe. It's just, it's not as easy as saying, like, it's an open protocol for third parties, or it's an SDK, or an APK, or whatever you want to call them, whatever you would need to do it. So it would be cool. I would like it, but I can't see it happening anytime soon. FC. Is it possible to add exposure metering based on face body detection, AF, to say 70 IRE? I mean, maybe. We do have, so there is, spot auto exposure and stuff like that, for metering. And the camera does have, let me see if I can find it. And then I'll go back and look at the other question as well. There was a setting, I just can't remember if we still do it or if it was something that we did a while ago. It was in... What menu was that in? Human detect... Yeah, so there we go. So there is an option here called face priority and multimetering. This option, when set to multimetering, the camera measures brightness based on the detected faces. So FC, there is something that exists in the camera like that. You have to be in the multimetering mode, so you have to be in the full, kind of open area for metering. But yeah, if you make sure that face priority and multimetering is turned on, then it sounds like it's going to do what you want it to do. So for those that don't know, that's our multimetering. That's the full, area of it. So if you're in that and then you have face and eye detect turned on and it detects a face, it'll adjust the exposure for that. I don't know what the exact IRE would be for it, but yeah, so... do you suppose you could bring someone from Lumix UK EU in if you get the chance? I think it could be interesting on our exchange with things like Lumix Loan, etc. We've looked at doing it before. The biggest problem is time zones. Usually by the time we're doing this, what time is it in... Forget, where is it? Yeah, what's the time zone in London right now? It is it's 7. It's almost 8 o'clock, 8 p.m. in London right now. And usually that was kind of the issue, is that when we do these streams, for consistency, time wise at least, it's right at dinner time. It's right when staff is getting off of work in Europe. So that's usually why it's caused some problems in the past, especially when we've tried to bring in some European, creators and, photographers, videographers. But I can look back into it and see, maybe it's a one-off or we do it at a different time that it makes more sense, and then we can, kind of go around that. But, yeah, it's a good suggestion. Yeah, so I wanted to look at the option there for changing the subject detection options. So if we go in, one of the things that you'll see with the new 24-60 is that if I go into the gear menu and then we go down into the lens options, you'll see lens function button setting, and you'll see in video mode you have a couple different options here. So crop zoom, hybrid zoom, like all that kind of stuff, aspect ratio, detecting subjects. So if we've got it now, and you're going to look right here, this icon. I can't make the icon any bigger, but watch that icon. So now as I press the button, you see that the icon changes. And this will cycle through all of the options that are on the camera. So I'm going to go back to, this is eye detect. Now if I start recording, yeah, so with our system, once you set your subject detection and you start recording video, it's locked to that subject detection. So yeah, we were able to confirm that. I'll bring it up to the engineering team if that's something that could be done or changed. Honestly, never had that request before, but you know, it's good to have the request. Let's see here. Dave says, on my I think you mean S1II. I sometimes want IS off when taking video, as I often use a tripod. For photos. When switching between photo and video mode, I always have to manually change the IS setting. Yeah, I have that one has been mentioned up to the engineering team, is if that is something that could be kept separate between the two. A lot of the settings are designed to be independent between photo and video. Some of them are still kept to be universal because based on some sets of logic, it makes sense that they're universal. On other sets like what you've described, I can understand why you wouldn't want it that way. But yeah, we would have to talk with the engineers about that one. So, can Lumix Flow and Lumix Lab be operational simultaneously, i.e. auto transfer while shooting with Lumix Lab as a wireless monitor? I mean, it depends on what you're gonna kind of do with it. So, because Lumix Lab can auto transfer and it has a monitoring and a control functionality built into it, you wouldn't need Lumix Flow. Even if you're doing video, you wouldn't necessarily need Flow either, because you can do a lot of stuff with Lumix Lab for it. Lumix Flow, if you're working on more of the workflow solution, hence the name Flow, that's where you'd use that. So you could just use it in Lumix Lab and you'd be able to have the auto transfer running. I've never tested it. I don't think you can have both running at the same time, because I think the way the communication happens, because if it's going to be Wi-Fi, the devices are direct connected, and that is one of those things where it's, you know, it's a single point direct connected, so that you can't have, you know, someone else just, you know, kind of jump on your camera's SSID while you're in the middle of doing something and, you know, kind of grab control or take your photos or videos or stuff like that. So some of that stuff, that's might be why you can't do both, because there's also not a registration between the two, because they, you know, they stay open so you can use them for whatever. But yeah, I would recommend just using Lumix Lab at that point for your wireless monitor, and you can still have your auto transfer running while using Lumix Lab. So, hey Dustin, yeah, we're pretty much just hanging out today, just answering anyone's questions that y'all have. So, where did we go? There we go. What features do you think that reviewers aren't covering enough, or that people tend to miss on Lumix cameras? I've done a couple videos about this, or streams about this, you know, like lesser known features and stuff like that. Like, I think things like a lot of our photographic capabilities don't get covered often, but I think that's partially because obviously we're known more as a video brand. Photographically, I think there's a lot of people sleeping on what our cameras can do photographically. I think more recently with the S1R2, we've seen a lot more people using our brand as photographic tool. In fact, I think we've seen more people now than ever between the S9's announcement. Ironic, I know for some of you, but between the S9 and the S1R2, we've seen a big spike in photography use of the cameras. So yeah, it's that's probably the biggest one. It's just like the photo stuff there. I think I missed the answer. Are photos in Lumix Lab App downsampled when loaded? No, they're not downsampled. I think they're played back at a lower resolution. So, sorry, yes, I mean the internal shutter that protects the sensor when changing lenses. In the menu, it's called shutter behavior at power off. Yeah, so if I go back up and look at what your question was before about that, the shutter question. Being able to set shutter behavior at power off on the S1R2 is great. However, you cannot set this as a shortcut on a function. Any reason why not? Yeah, so the reason why that's not like a custom function thing is because, at least from the logic that I understand, and what I would tend to kind of lean more in line with is like, I don't know why I would want to toggle it on or off. It's either I want a camera that can close the shutter when I power the camera off, or I don't. The design of the new shutter is beefed up way higher than what any of the other shutters were from the previous cameras, so you're perfectly fine. You're just always leaving it on. In fact, I always leave it on. So I think that's really just the simple reason why it's not something you can toggle, because it's not something that you're going to often need to be able to just like turn on and off. It's more of like a deeper, this is how I prefer to work. Other people prefer to work a different way and not have it closed. So yeah. Yeah. I'd be curious though, Steph. I'd be curious why you would need to be able to toggle that particular function on and off quickly, instead of just because it doesn't really change anything, one way or another. It only affects when the camera's turned off. So, let's see here. Alex, Bluetooth on the S1R2 is always one connection. Will Bluetooth support timecode and smartphone at the same time when shooting video and still? Is it always a multi-step change? I believe they are independent, so I don't think you can do multiples at a time. Yeah. How come you don't talk about the G9 Mark too much? Honestly, it's a simple reason. I don't have my sample here anymore, so it's much harder for me to go through menus and talk about things like that, and my GH7 has been sent out, so I don't have either of those cameras on hand to be able to confidently go through the menus and, kind of address with people. But yeah, I mean, we could always, talk more about them. If people have questions about those cameras, 100%, definitely drop them in the chat. And we'll always, chat and talk about it. The other thing is that the way our, kind of ecosystem is designed between full frame and micro four thirds, or our crop censored line, is that our menu options and our terminology and our, iconography in the menus are the same between all of these cameras, from G9 Mark II, even G100D. All of our terminology and naming structures and iconography and where, what menu options do what, it's all the same across the cameras. So it doesn't really matter what camera we talk about. Obviously, with the S1 series, and obviously the S52 series, there is a much broader audience that are searching for information and looking for, YouTube videos that have content about that. So, on average, sometimes it's making sure that, SEO makes sense, that, when people search, they see the videos that they want. And because they're the newer cameras, those are the ones that always just draw the most, eyes to anything. But every single thing that we ever talk about with these cameras, unless it's a feature that camera just doesn't have, the iconography is always going to be the same. What we describe, the general menu location is pretty much always going to be the same. So that's why we don't necessarily always feel we have to go back and talk specifically about a certain product, but I can make a concerted effort to, you know, use the G9 Mark II or a GH7 when I get them back, you know, more as the demo cameras, you know, to kind of talk about it. 100% can do that. Yeah. All right. I want to talk about the file transferring thing with this, because I did mention we were going to talk about it, and we've got about 30 more minutes left today. So with the S1II Series cameras, after the latest round of firmware update, on all three cameras, you have the ability now to send images and videos between your external SSD and the onboard card media, so your CF Express or an SD card. So before the stream, I took a bunch of pictures here, recording some video as well. And one of the things that is, you know, kind of really cool about this is that, you know, right now I've got all this stuff on my SSD. So if I go into playback, you'll see the images that I just took, all that kind of stuff. There's the video file that I took, 4K 60. Now, what's nice is that, and this is bi-directional, when I'm in playback, which I'm in right now, so if you look, this is playing back the images, I can press the menu set button, I can go into the playback menu, and I can select this option called copy. Now, if you're not hooked up to an HDMI cable, you don't have to go into playback to get to this menu, but when you are connected over HDMI, so if you're on an external monitor, you do need to put the device into playback mode for this menu to show up. But from here, I just go into copy, it reads what devices are available, and then you get a couple different selections. So I have copy direction. So in this case, because I'm primarily recording to the SSD, and I have an SD card in here, I want to do SSD to SD card, because I want to take what's on my SSD, this is the Kondor Blue ProBlade SSD handle, and I want to send that to my next storage SSD, or SD card. I can then either select what items I want to copy, I can copy all in a folder, so I can pick which folder I want to send, or I can copy all media. So for this, I'm going to say, let's do select copy. So we're going to go into this, it's going to bring me up the folder of like, hey, these are the photos that you took. Let's say I want to take this video, I want to take this video, and I want to take this still. I just press display. It says you're going to copy 3 things over from SSD to your SD card. Do you want to do this? And you just hit this. And that's how easy it is. It just copies the stuff over. Now, depending on how large of the content that you're going to be wanting to send over, it could take longer, shorter, you know, just because it's on volume of content. But I also have that ability that if I've been capturing my video footage to the CF Express card, but I want to get it off onto the SSD so that I can maybe take that SSD and store it, hand it to a DIT, or just take that SSD and have a backup. So if I just want to have an on-the-fly ability to back up my content, I could do CF Express to the SSD, I could do SD card to the SSD, and in this case I can say let's copy all media. And this is only going to do 11 images just because that's all that was there. And I can just click the thing over and it just copies the stuff over. Now it's copied, and all the stuff that was on the SD card is now on my SSD, which means I could go in and just format the SD card. I do not recommend this in a professional sense, but if I had to, and you know, I really needed that space, I could just format the SD card because I know that I copied all my stuff to the SSD, and then I have freed up space. I do not recommend doing that in general, ever. Don't erase your SDs or SSDs or CF Express cards until you've gotten home and you've made backups of them. So, you know, keep normal file backup rules in mind when you're going to be doing stuff like this. But there are situations that, like, hey, I desperately need more space and I'm okay to take this risk. Just know that it's on you if you take the risk. So, but yeah, that's one of the new features that the S1II Series has, with the way we're able to handle SSD, CF Express, and SD storage. So you get a bunch of different ways that you can move and shift and you know, copy your content around. Oh, hello, Chrissy. Let's see here. Rhett says, you're a man of culture, loving the titanium gold. Seriously considering finding some black market dealer to send me one from Japan. Yeah, I really like those colors too. I never think it's worth going through that process. Because you don't have warranty in the US with stuff like that. It's just, gets a little, you know, a little risky to do that kind of stuff, because God forbid you have any kind of problems with the product, you're gonna end up paying full board or repair. There is no warranty support like that. Let's see here. Top down driver. Hey, ran into something where I have a question. Can you reset a single custom setting back to default without affecting the other settings in the camera? Example, can I reset C1 to a default? Let's walk through this, actually. So if you want to set, you know, your C1, C2, C3, those kind of settings, I believe you have the ability to I might have to dig further into this, because I thought there was a way that we could do it, but that's reload settings, set loading details. Yeah, let me look into that one. Top down. I seem to remember that there may have been a way that you could, you know, kind of default your C1 through C whatever, but I'd have to look further into it to see. So, orange. Yeah, so anything that people, you know, like future development or product or firmware or anything like that. Obviously, I can't talk about anything, even if I did know it, until things are public. So, yeah, sorry, y'all. Let's see here. Love MP4 Lite. Any chance we'll get a version of it in 2397 or in full HD? I have no idea. I would love to see MP4 Lite kind of expand more than just the 30 frames per second or 2997. Because, yeah, I think all of you using it have shown, like, its flexibility for a lot of people. So, the engineers are aware of it. We know that they've been made aware of it. They see that you guys are all using MP4 Lite in ways that, you know, we didn't necessarily believe people really would want to use it. Usually this side of the industry, you know, the kind of a little bit more experienced, you know, looking for the highest quality, almost always the conversations are, I want higher bit rate, I want better quality, higher performance, all that kind of stuff. Rarely do you see like, no, it's actually a pretty good, you know, I'm good with a moderate bit rate kind of thing. So, yeah. Jonstera, thanks for these streams. Well, you're welcome. Could you answer why the S1II Series cameras aren't at Best Buy? They are. They are online at Best Buy. They're just not in the stores. But you can buy them. You can buy them online, do store pickup, all that kind of fun stuff. Test. If you're looking at, for example, A6700 ZVE1, their screen has touchscreen options that change the AF's subject, and now they added even more automatic subject detection. Yeah, I'll mention it to the engineering team to see if it's something that's doable on ours. Yeah, there's always going to be little differences between the way each company kind of handles, you know, how they want to run various different things. All right, I do want to talk about anamorphic stills capture and the way that I work with it, because I forgot about this like 3 weeks ago talking about it. But one of the things that, you know, I mentioned before about how I really like these Saturn series anamorphic lenses is that in the photographic sense, you know, you can always use lenses like this for stills capture. Traditionally, anamorphic lenses are going to be manual focus, so you're going to have to get used to either things like zone focusing or, you know, understanding hyperfocal, which is kind of weird on these, and doing things at a much slower pace, at least at start, until you get really good at it. This is where I'd say if you talk to a you know, heavy Leica M series user, they get to a point, and I used to be able to do this, not as much anymore, where I can just, you know, through feeling, you know, if I know where my hard stop is for my close focus, through feeling, I would know how far to turn the focus ring and know where my focus needs to be for someone, and, you know, have it in acceptably, you know, good focus. But with anamorphic, because you have to kind of work that way, you're also contending with the fact that your image is squeezed. Now, if you decide to go through that process and want to capture with these, there's a couple things to keep in mind. So one, you could always use something like a 133. The 133 are the lenses that I've used most recently because they're autofocus. So the 40 millimeter f1.8, or is it f1.8 or t1.8? T1.8. Yes, T1.8. So the 40 millimeter T1.8 or the 20 millimeter T1.8 as well. They're 1:3:3, so your squeeze ratio, it's not really all that, you know, kind of heavy. So you're not worried about, like, you know, people looking like tiny little twigs standing in the frame. You know, they still look relatively normal, but if you look at an image quickly, you'll be like, all right, something's a little off here. So what I want to do is look at, you know, I have this image opened up in Photoshop. This was from New York back during B&H Build. So obviously, you know, that's Cam Mackey. We were out there shooting, you know, capturing images, and I was shooting with the anamorphic lens. In fact, I think, ironically, I don't know if Cam is here. I know he's been here before. I think this is the opposite shot of the one that you took of me that you put in your one video recently. But, you know, what you notice about this from a photographic sense is like, okay, if I was just quickly looking at this image and I didn't know anything about, you know, distortion and stuff like that, I wouldn't necessarily think that this is, like, quote unquote wrong. But those of us in here, and I'm going to jump ahead in chat so that actually as everyone's here, I'm willing to bet that a lot of you in here are just going like, oof, I can tell the squeeze, you know, like it's just too much there, right? So the way you fix this in photography is actually fairly super easy. So I'm just going to zoom this image out real quick here. All you have to do if you want to shoot stills in anamorphic and be able to get them back out to your regular, you know, format is one, like obviously these are raw files, but I'm going to go up into image size. I'm going to unlink these. So I don't want my height and width to be linked together. I want to unlink them, go to my width, and all I have to type in is star and then the de-squeeze or the squeeze ratio of the lens I'm using. So in this case, these are 1:3:3 anamorphic lenses. Hit OK. It's going to give me an error because of, you know, point less than a single pixel, you know, numbers. So it brings it to the closest. Now, once I hit OK, it just de-squeezes that image out. And now Cam looks normal. Doesn't look like all crushed together and tall. It's the same when you look at, you know, some of these other images, you know, depending on how you want to do it. So this is something that you can, I believe, I used to, I think, have it set up, but I stopped doing it this way for a while because I was playing around with different lenses. But literally, again, you just come in, you find the width, you multiply it by the de-squeeze ratio that you want to use for that lens, you clear through that, you hit OK, and now your image is out and you're good to go. Now, what's cool about doing this in full frame with a 1:3:3 is that if I remember this right, I think, yeah, a 1:3:3 anamorphic on a 3x2 sensor is a 1:3:3 anamorphic on a 3x2 sensor is going to de-squeeze out to a 2:1 ratio. So if you're someone who shares on things like Instagram, if you share on social media, 2-to-1 ratio is the widest that you can put without having it force a crop on a width. So if you're holding your device like this and you want to have it shown, a 2-to-1 ratio is the largest that you can do that way. But this makes it like super easy to be able to, you know, play around, shoot with some of these lenses. If you want to change it and say I shot this with a 1.66 or the 1.6 lens, Brandon was in the chat, I know, before. So, hey, Brandon, there you go. You would just come in, again, do image size, go to the width that you want there. If this was a 1.6 lens, I would just convert it 1.6, and then it would obviously give me, in this case, the wrong image because of how de-squeezed it is. But again, simple, image size, multiply by the resolution that you want to de-squeeze it by, and then now the image looks normal again. So yeah, I wanted to make sure that I covered that so that it was actually something I can reference back to, because I get that asked a lot, and I always forget to record it. So, hey, cool. Yeah, so let's see here. What did Kofi say? I mean, quote, normal and cam in the same sentence is rare. Fair. I don't even think Cam's in here and he's catching strays. Where were we here? Yeah, 104 is equal to 40C. You were spot on. Yeah, it gets hot. Yeah, so it was 104 yesterday. It's actually dropped. It's 97 right now. Hooray. Let's see here. Did you guys stop support with updates the S52 series? No. S52 series is still going to get Lumix Flow. That's all we've, kind of talked about so far. So, loving the S1II and the 24-60. Great product, market fit. Is cropless E stabilization and or Cinelike A2 going to come to the S9? No worries if you don't know or can't say. Thanks in advance. I don't think so. Honestly, I don't think so, because the S9 is designed as something completely different. So yeah, I wouldn't think so, but who knows? Let's see here. Yeah, as a reminder, if you do have questions to ask, make sure you tag at Lumix USA, because usually by, after maybe like 10 minutes into the stream, 20 minutes into actually like talking about the questions, if I don't see Lumix USA, I'm not going to read them. It's nothing personal to anybody. It's just, otherwise I will never get through questions. I wish Lumix would put a GH7 sensor in an S9 body with a small grip. That would be nice. Can I control start, stop, record on my DJI RS4 Pro using Bluetooth for my S1II, or do I have to use a cable? At this point, you have to use a cable. The RS4 Mini is the one that has Bluetooth compatibility for the camera control stuff. I don't know what the issue was, or why the 4 and the 4 Pro weren't added with compatibility at this time. But yeah, it's the Mini at this point is the one that has the Bluetooth support for now. Would love to have illuminated buttons back on the next Lumix high-end models. A shoulder display S1 would be nice too. Yeah, the illuminated buttons I would agree with, or some sort of like was it photosensitive ink or whatever that will illuminate in the dark. I question if the top display would come back, mainly because it was an overwhelming majority of people did not want to see it because they felt it was wasted space. So, unfortunately, sometimes majority rules with some various design choices, but Tommy says, I'm not sleeping on photo functions. I use mine G9 Mark II and S5 Mark II almost exclusively for photography. Yeah. So people, I don't think in practical use cases, and definitely some, some reviewer and content creators out there that discuss camera products, I think people do talk about it. But a lot of major platforms, I think, kind of subconsciously write us off as a photographic company because they're more comfortable talking about us as a video brand. So anytime we do stuff that's, interesting in photography, like we've done high-res shot photos in camera that have been stitched in camera and produce raw and JPEG images for years now. And it always gets just called a gimmick and then written off by a lot of these platforms. And, that's not in different views, that's not necessarily a way that you should be reviewing a product if you're, gonna talk about what a user may find interesting. Actually covering the piece about it, what can be done with it, how does it work, what its use cases are. To me, that's what I would find interesting in, commentary about different features. But I'm someone that will sit and watch hours and hours of camera reviews or product reviews or tech reviews because, I want to know as much about the ins and outs of it. And if someone to me just says, it's kind of a gimmicky feature, we don't see the point of it, and then just kind of moves on, it's like, okay, well, you didn't give a reason behind it. You didn't defend your position as to why you think that, which is something that I think would be interesting to see if more people did that. And it's the same in the video side too. Why are certain features more valuable? And from a very specific creator's perspective, why would they be valuable? Would be cool. But yeah, is it possible to apply camera color profiles or LUTs to raw files in Capture One? So Capture One, you would use .icc profiles. So you would need to convert a .cube file, which would be the LUT. You would need to convert that from .cube to .icc. I know one of the look packs that I really like for kind of the classic film style is Art of Photography's looks that he's got for Lightroom, and I think there's also the Capture One versions of it as well. So you can have those applied. The thing to remember is that Capture One handles images different than most other programs. So with Adobe's products, you have the ability to use the camera's matching color profiles, which for some people is huge. For myself, I know for the longest time that's how I wanted to work with my stills. I wanted to, if I shoot in Vivid, I want to be able to start at Vivid and then make any additional edits that I need to, knowing that my raw file has that much more flexibility. But now that I've moved my image pipeline over to Capture One because of the numerous problems that I've experienced, and I know a lot of others have still been experiencing with Adobe Camera Raw, I don't miss needing those color profiles because usually if it's a raw file, I know I'm going in and I want to tweak and alter the colors a lot, so I just do it once and then I just save that file out and I can reload it. I can, reload my edit settings, all that kind of stuff. And if I want to have an image shot with a certain LUT or a certain in-camera profile, I'm just taking the JPEG from the camera. Because in my mind, the use case is there. And this is kind of the idea behind real-time LUT is if I like the look, I'm going to build it and then I'm going to put it in the camera so I don't have to go to post. I don't have to load it on the, on the computer or on my phone or whatever and do the edits and create all this look and, re-edit something that honestly, it's just going to get closer to what the JPEG was and I'm going to share it on social, or even if I ever decided to print something, out-of-camera JPEGs are more than enough to print with these days, depending on, the average sizes that the average person prints. So I've taken a step back from where raw files are great. I love having raw, especially if I'm doing night work or astrophotography or star trails or light painting, that kind of thing, because of how much flexibility you have. If I'm doing street photography, 9 out of the 10 shots that, say, I take and I like out of a session are all going to be the JPEGs, and there's that one image that I'm like, I kind of wish I could bring that sky back a little bit more. Or, maybe, in some of the New York shots, like the ones here, or like the one, where is it? Like this one. Like, I shot it in Vivid, but I was like, I don't actually like how crushed Vivid was, because Vivid is a very crushed profile. I wanted to open up more in, kind of Cam's jacket here. So I flipped it to Cinelike A, Cinelike A2, and I like the balance better there. But then on, these shots, I would leave it in standard or Vivid, and the only reason I'm going to bring them into software is to do my D-squeeze with these because of the anamorphic lens. So, yeah. You can apply those things to the raw files. You can apply LUTs to raw files. In fact, so like this is Photoshop, I know, but in Photoshop, one of the adjustments here is, I think you go, you could tell I edit a lot this way, don't I? So we need to do adjustment layer. So if you want to load in a .cube file, you'd go to color lookup, and this is what would allow you to load in, actually, is it a color lookup? Yeah, it's color lookup, right? Yeah. So you'd add color lookup, and then you can load your different LUTs into here, and you can apply it onto that image. So if you shoot your raw, you edit your raw file in raw to the way you want it, and then you apply a LUT here for it. So you do have an ability to do it. Capture One, I think you just need to use the ICC profiles. I haven't done much of that in Capture One though. Piku, it would be extremely helpful if we could have an option on the S1II to output just to HDMI, disabling internal screen, but get all the AF modes just like with the internal screen only. That'd be an interesting idea. I don't know if it's actually possible, but yeah. Just a reminder, if you ask questions, make sure to tag at Lumix USA, or I'm not going to see them and I'm not going to address them. JC, can we get the Cinelike A2 profile on other camera bodies? And if so, which are ready for the hardware with it? Honestly, no clue, JC. Yeah. Any chance we will get full HD at 120, 240 in raw output to feed it to Video Assistant S1 Mark II? I don't think so. I don't know if that would be either heat or windowed, because the other thing you remember is that our raw output is pixel to pixel, so you'd be going into full HD, and I don't even know if the sensor can operate at that frame rate resolution combination. So yeah, I don't believe so. What we've got is what we've got there. You've got 4K 120 if you need it. There's no subject detection in high frame rate modes in GH7 and S1II. Is this hardware limitation or just don't want to? No, it would be a hardware limitation. We're not a brand that does stuff just because we, doesn't do something because we don't want to. If something can't be done, it's either it's not physically possible with the hardware, or there's just not enough processing to do it, or it's something that is at the current time, not coding possible. It doesn't mean that we wouldn't want to do it or are choosing not to do it. A lot of times it's more just down to hardware can't handle it, or it would push things out of bounds for image quality, for the benchmarks that we set, so on and so forth. So, here we got about another 2 minutes, and then I do have to wrap up for this. Here we go. Have you had a chance to check the slow and quick rec mode switching? S&Q is currently unusable. Should be siloed mode. So unusable would be a very strong term to use. I disagree that it's unusable. Just for you, you wish it would be done in a different way. I have checked, and I honestly slipped my mind of actually, kind of following up with it, but I will take a note and follow up with it again. But yeah. Thanks for these live feeds. Any plan for an update on the S1R Mark II? Kind of useless with the low, so we can choose lower FPS in electronic shut. I think you mean the electronic shutter different speeds. I don't have any update on that stuff at this point. What's up, Anson? Yeah, Beard's going pretty strong right now. Justice for the top-down display. What improvements have been made to the Lumix GH7 internal recording options, especially in terms of codec support, bitrate, and dynamic range for professional video workflows? David, I would highly recommend you take a look at someone like Film's video about the GH7. They can give you a much better, very, very well done discussion about the product and its uses. Otherwise, yeah, I would take a look at some others that have been out there and used the GH7 in professional workflows, because I can just rattle off specs, but those might not mean what you need them to mean. Any updates or anything? Tell us about MFT line. Also, will GH7 get Lumix Flow compatibility? GH7 is it's scheduled to get GH7 Flow the Lumix Flow compatibility on the GH7. As far as anything to tell you about the Micro Four Thirds line, still going strong. Still doing firmware. We had GH7 recently. The G97. G100 still is, like, these are all current cameras. I get people want updates, but you also have to remember, we're not a company that will just update a product just for the hell of it, just to throw a new number on there and maybe change one thing. The only times things like that happens are either when we need to change a component, which means you have to change the part number of the product, it's kind of it. Like, hey, the G100D or G97 or stuff like that, when it's updating to, like, add USB-C or change a monitor because the original panel is no longer available, stuff like that. Yeah, like, that's when you get little updates like that. But we're not just a company that will update a bunch of stuff just to try to get more money out of people for no reason. When we update stuff in the camera world, we update because there's reason for update. There is a substantial benefit to update. Whether that makes sense for you or not, that's a different story. But Micro Four Thirds line is, with the GH7, the G9 Mark II, they're still the highest resolution Micro Four Thirds cameras on the market. They're still some of the highest dynamic range performance Micro Four Thirds cameras on the market. They're some of the most well-balanced when it comes between photo and video use in the crop sensor world, and honestly even into some of the full frame side of the industry as well. They're some of the most technologically advanced cameras that you can get. So I think in some cases we need to break our mindsets of everything needs to be updated every year, or really fast, or it's quote unquote dead kind of thing. Like, that's some of the biggest BS I've witnessed in the industry over the last over a decade that I've been working at Panasonic, is that no camera company is dead, especially in a lineup like that. Like, Micro Four Thirds is still going strong. It's still an amazing selling line for us. It's the core of what brought us to where we are today. And yeah, updates and product cycles and releases are always various different schedules or timing. So Micro Four Thirds and crop sensor will have its time where you'll see a bunch of activity and cool things coming out, and then you'll see things will change and it'll go to the other line, and you'll see things come out and products and firmware and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes you'll see a little bit of overlap between the two where you get benefits for both, but that's just the ebb and flow of product development and the fact that you've got two separate lines. Micro Four Thirds is also the most, I'd say, mature. Well, actually, it is. It is the most matured mirrorless format, period. It is the first mirrorless format, period. We were the first ones to ever do it. So if anyone, has a series of cameras that have the most history, the longest running lifespan, that kind of thing, it's Micro Four Thirds. So, yeah, nothing to worry on that side of it. Let's see here. We got a couple more questions, and then we do have to wrap it for today. Again, if I missed your question this week, either it's because I didn't see at Lumix USA beforehand, like you see a bunch of people tagging. So if I didn't get to your question, drop it in the comment section after this stream, and we can address it during next week's. So, are there Lumix Color ICC files available somewhere? I use On One, Photo Raw, and their built-in camera color profile doesn't match the Lumix profiles, but it is possible to load ICCs. We do not have ICCs available of our color profiles. I have asked. I honestly, it was a couple of weeks ago, and then I was on vacation, so I haven't had a chance to follow up on that, but I will ask again. It would be cool to have ICCs, but I am definitely not someone to know how easy or difficult or time-consuming or cost-consuming something like that would be if the, in-camera profiles are not already developed in that format. So, but yeah, we can ask though. Is there a way to get Lumix Lab running on a Chromebook? Bluetooth works, but the app can't establish Wi-Fi because Android runs in a container. I don't believe you can do it on a Chromebook for now. I know Matt and I have asked numerous times about either Chrome OS is one thing for it, or even on Mac OS, because you can run apps natively on the ARM chips for the MacBooks. Again, I'm not a software developer, so I don't know what the difference is, other than I know that all of these different devices handle things like Wi-Fi very different from each other. So, yeah. But we'll always ask again. Is it possible to get Super 16 mode on the S52X? I don't believe so. It's a little too limited in scope for general use. It's a much more specialized format if you wanted to have Super 16 sized window, which makes it less likely to be deployed if it's not something that's already thought further ahead. So, and then we got two last questions here. Is it possible? No, one last question. We know 240 FPS would be good enough, but I understand regarding that HDMI output only if it would be extremely helpful. I've seen a lot of discussion about it on YouTube and Reddit. Yeah, we can definitely bring that up to the engineering team. It's an interesting way to do it, where maybe you have to make the choice. And remember too, a lot of times these things come in where it's like, hey, it's a cool idea in theory, but in practice there'd be way more problems that arise from it for service and support, more phone calls, more confusion in the markets. All that kind of stuff has to get put together to determine, is this something that could be done, or is it going to cause more problems in, the end user's world with the cameras. All right, cool. Like I said, if I did not get to your question, I sincerely apologize. Obviously, there were tons of questions and tons of back and forth and awesome conversations. This is always so much fun to come back, get into doing these streams and just be able to catch up with y'all. So yeah, if I didn't get to your question, drop it in the comment section after this video goes live. So after this streams, once the stream's ended, or I think even now, you can add it to the comment section. If it stays in the chat section, I can't easily find it and search through to be able to reference and, find, answers for next week's stream, that kind of thing. But if it's in the comment section underneath the video, it's easier for me to find it. That also helps us with engagement and all that stuff, so more people see the videos and, this just gets out to a broader audience. If you liked these conversations, give us a like. Subscribe if you're not subscribed already. We will be back next Thursday, 2 p.m. Eastern, so make sure to join us at that time. Check out the Discord. It's discord.gg/Lumix USA. That's the shorthand to get into it. It's called the Lumix Creators Club. Join us over there. Take part in some of the challenges. Check out the content of the week. Ask us questions over there. You can always ask me questions over there as well. I am Sean from Lumix over on Discord, and I think I'm Sean at Lumix, or Sean from Lumix on Reddit as well. Otherwise, yeah. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning in. We'll be back next Thursday at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. I hope you get out there, get a great day, have an awesome weekend, create some cool stuff, and if you get something cool that you really think is awesome and you want to share it to people, show it to us, tag us, show us on Discord, show us on Instagram, on TikTok, all those platforms. We love to see it. With that, later, everybody. Talk to you soon.